Good morning, everybody. This is the asynchronous class video for Friday, April 17th. And the main learning focus of this asynchronous class is basically an activity that's going to help you choose your new audience for paper 3. And it'll also touch on what genre might be the best way to reach that new audience. So for today's video, I recommend having a sheet of paper with you because that's going to be the easiest way to do the onion activity that I'm going to describe for you. Before we dive into that, I wanted to make sure you guys know where to find the rubric for the RAC final draft. So if you navigate to Blackboard, you will see it under Paper 2 Materials. So go to Course Content, and then Paper 2 Materials, and you will see it here, rubric for RAC paper. What I also did is I revised the postscript questions slightly. So if you go to Project 2 assignment sheets and you click on the RAC papers assignment description, you'll see one additional postscript question, and what it talks about is the slight change I made this semester where you didn't have to use in-text citations. I have a question that asks you about that. But I'll go into that more next week. So that's there if you want to see it. And that rubric might end up being helpful as you peer review because you can be kind of keeping that in mind as you give people feedback. So as you know, if you've ever seen an onion, when you cut it, there are rings. And that's really the extent of the analogy here. The activity I'm about to take you through is going to involve putting your topic in the center of a bunch of concentric circles and then moving increasingly far away from the topic, but considering who is related to the topic in some way. And I'm going to take it through an example topic so that you can see how it looks in action rather than just in theory. So this is what I'm referring to when I say the onion activity. So basically the first part of the activity is trying to identify who are some stakeholders in who have a stake in your issue. By issue, we mean that debate that your research question is getting at, the disagreement that people have about a certain topic, or maybe a topic that has a variety of different answers. So ask yourself, who cares about this? Who's impacted by this? And who impacts this? So it can be people who receive your topic or people who contribute to your topic. Those all count. So let me take you through what this might look like. Let's say my topic is the benefits and risks in adopting a vegan diet. So that's kind of the central issue or debate that maybe my research paper was addressing. I already did a bunch of research. I wrote my RAC paper based on this question. I know what a lot of experts think. But now for paper 3, I've got to pick a different audience who maybe needs to know some things about this issue or maybe should know some things about this issue. So I think about, okay, who's one step removed from the issue? Who's closest? Who's most affected? And I might come up with these ideas. I've got a bunch of different groups. I've got people who are fully committed vegans, meaning they already think a vegan diet is amazing and is the way to go. They're certainly a stakeholder. There's also people who are considering veganism for a variety of reasons. There's those who are considering it for ethical reasons. Maybe they dislike some of the animal treatment that's involved in the meat industry. Maybe they want to go beyond being just a vegetarian and they want to also be getting rid of industries such as, chicken egg laying, for lack of a better term. There might be a different group of people who are considering veganism for health reasons. Maybe they have read an article or heard something about veganism being helpful for one's health. And then lastly, there might also be a group that would relate to my topic, which is vegans experiencing health concerns. So people who are already vegans but are doubting whether maybe they should consider eating animal products again because of iron deficiency. So those are kind of the four that came to mind. You could, of course, think of additional ones if you wanted. Then if I go one ring further out, it's people who maybe aren't directly impacted, but people who would still have a stake in my issue. So I go one ring further out. That would include, these were just the ones that came to mind for me, the industry that involves meat substitutes. So there's a lot of companies now that are going into this industry and trying to find things that have the texture of meat but are vegan and so on. Then there's sort of on the other end of the spectrum, the beef, pork, and chicken farmers. They have a stake in this issue. If the number of vegans increases, their industry maybe is in danger. There's this was kind of a different direction I thought of, which is public school cafeterias. I have a friend who is vegan and is trying to raise her children to be vegan as well. But as a result, they really can't rely on the school cafeteria food because it's so challenging to find vegan options. So public school cafeterias could be a potential stakeholder in this. Elementary school teachers who teach nutrition. Typically when nutrition is taught, at least back in the 90s when I was in elementary school, we always learned about meat being a core part of one of the food groups. So they might be impacted by this debate about veganism. Sports clubs and gyms was another group that came to mind. State representatives in states with large amounts of livestock agriculture, they might be a potential audience for a radical revision. Doctors, certainly. And so all of these different word clusters are potential audiences. And what you'd want to think about once you've brainstormed a bunch of potential audiences is, if I was going to write to the public school cafeterias, what is my purpose? Am I going to lay out all the reasons why they need to have more vegan options? That could be one purpose. If I'm going to write to a state representative in states with large amount of livestock agriculture, maybe I need to address some of the economic concerns that they might have regarding an increase in veganism. So ask yourself basically what does each of these audiences need to understand better, and what do you need them to do to further your cause? So you do want to kind of think about some of the things that you believe now that you've done all the research you've done on your topic. So really, we're taking where you left off with the RAC paper, and now we're just sending that information into a different direction. So once you've established your purpose, that is going to impact maybe which audience and purpose really grabs you. So maybe you brainstorm all of these different audiences, but the one that really grabs you and the one that matches up with the research you did and the experts you consulted, that's maybe the one to take forward and to try out for step 3 and 4 of this process. So ask yourself, what did you learn from your sources, from the sources you read for your annotated bib and your RAC paper? What did you learn from those sources that this audience needs to hear about? How can you form an argument that this audience can respond to and maybe do something with? So if I were to pick maybe the audience of vegans who are currently experiencing health concerns that may or may not be related to their veganism, I'm going to need to think about, how do I reach that group? So this is where we think about what genres of writing are going to be the best way to reach that particular audience. This is where you might go back to that slide that I offered on Wednesday with the list of all the different types of genres. Two that come to mind for this particular group are, maybe it's a podcast that I use as my genre, and it's a podcast aimed at sort of health-minded people. And it could even be a vegan-specific podcast episode. And then it ends up being, I have to think about, how is a podcast usually set up structure-wise. They're often involving interviews, so maybe I could take one of the experts that I read for my RAC paper and write the podcast as if it's an interview with that expert. I know I've seen that work really well. Or other times podcasts take a more like lecture-y tone, and that can work as well. Usually it uses music or sounds or different voices because you don't have any visuals. So you have to kind of keep people interested that way. The other thing that might happen as you pick an audience is you might decide, well, I need to go one ring out in order to really reach those vegans experiencing health concerns. So you might decide, actually, I'm going to create a pamphlet for doctors that goes over some of the myths about veganism and maybe some of the benefits, and just lays it out in really clear medical terms for an audience of doctors. So this is why the onion activity can help, because even if you started thinking that this yellow part was going to be your audience, you might eventually decide that you need to go one ring out in order to reach or help that group. Just for sake of example, let's say I pick sports clubs and gyms as my audience, that maybe they have a limited perception of the vegan diet. So maybe my paper, my radical revision for paper 3, instead ends up being a poster or an infographic that goes in a gym locker room. And so I would want to think about, my audience is probably the people working out at the gym, and maybe some employees, but mainly the people who are getting changed in the locker room. And then I'd have to establish, what is my purpose? Is my purpose to try to advertise that a vegan diet is the way to go? Or is it maybe supplying them with some potential ways of getting enough iron? Or maybe it's a poster that includes famous athletes who are vegans. So there's all sorts of creative directions that paper 3 can go in, depending on your interests. A different route you could take is, maybe you decide that your audience at the gym is really more the people who work there, the personal trainers. And in that case, those folks don't have a lot of downtime. They might not respond as much to a email or letter type of genre, but maybe a video training that explains to the personal trainers how people can smartly go about adopting a vegan diet, and maybe some things that they can advise the people they're training about. So just to clarify, I think I said this on Wednesday, but you would not be actually creating the video. You'd be just writing a transcript of what would be in the video. So think of it as a script, where it would sort of have the speaker, the name of the person talking, colon, and then what they say. And then in parentheses, it would have like what happens on the screen. We'll be looking at some sample transcripts for those of you who are interested in using the genre of video or podcast or things like that. Yeah, so I hope that the onion activity makes some sense to you. The idea is that it helps you really think beyond just those quick audiences that come to mind, and really think a little further out. So again, just to summarize what the onion activity has you do, it helps you brainstorm who are some potential stakeholders. And then from all those stakeholders, think about which audiences would be the best audiences for your message or the information you learned. Identify what your main purpose will be in writing to that audience, and then choose your favorite audience purpose combo. Pick one you think you're going to have fun writing and that might not involve a ton of new research, because the idea is that you already did a lot of research for your RAC paper. And then do some thinking about what writing genre will best reach this audience and express your message. And what you'll notice is Journal 13 asks you to sort of share with me where you ended up after completing this onion activity for your topic. Eventually, the Project 3 also has this other component, which is called the rhetorical addendum. As I mentioned, it's just your little explanation that tells me what did you learn about this new audience and this new genre, and explain how those things shaped what you wrote. We'll look at some models of these so that you're not totally in the dark, but that's something to be thinking about. What additional research do you maybe need to do about audiences in order to understand your topic? So hopefully that's been helpful. What's left for completing this asynchronous lesson? You have just finished viewing the video. There are a couple things to read. There's the Project 3 assignment sheet. There's the A-level samples for Project 3. And then there are also all the essays of your peer review group. So remember, that was the main reason that today's class was asynchronous, is to give you just a little bit more time to devote to those. And the actual comments are not due till Monday's class, but you definitely want to start working on them soon. Where can you find the Project 3 assignment sheet and samples? You just go to Blackboard, click on Project 3 materials, and you'll see it there. There are a bunch of A-level samples there. There's a couple that are just the rhetorical addendum. The one that I believe is called, let me just go to it. Give me a second. Okay, so if I go to Project 3 materials, I know it's somewhere. Oh, I am in paper 2 materials. There it is. Okay, I'll try to move it up so it's a little bit easier for you all. Okay, Project 3 materials. So in the homework, it says to read the assignment sheet. That's going to be this thing, the Project 3 description. There are a couple things highlighted in there, and the reason they're highlighted is because I've tweaked the word count slightly to make things a little bit more manageable for you all. So just make sure you're looking at the most up-to-date version of the file. There's a rubric here, and then I'd like you to start, when you're looking for the samples, start with this one, because it's sort of the whole package. It has a letter that was written to a principal, a pamphlet that relates to the letter, and then that student's rhetorical addendum where they explain why they made those choices. So that would be the first one to look at. This one is another sample. It's not quite as strong, like it has a bunch of issues with the works cited page, but it'll still give you another example of what we're looking for with this kind of weird, unique project. And then these are the A-level rhetorical addendums. So they don't include the radical revision, but they do explain themselves really well as far as why they chose that particular audience, and why they chose that particular genre and that kind of thing. Okay, my last thing to share with you is Journal 13, which I started to say a few minutes ago, is now that you've gone through the onion activity, maybe take a few more minutes on your own to flesh out those ideas. And Journal 13 asks you the following. It says, brainstorm for the radical revision project. What ideas do you have so far for your new audience, purpose, and genre? What questions or concerns do you have? So this is kind of your space to show me that you're starting to think about Project 3. And what I will try to do is take a look at these once I finish grading everyone's drafts of the RAC paper, because I know you'll want feedback pretty soon about what genre and audience you're thinking of. Feel free to share a bunch of potential directions in Journal 13 if you haven't picked yours, and that way I know sort of the range of possibilities that you're considering. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Friday and the rest of your weekend. You can go to the syllabus to see what's coming next week. Generally, we're really diving into this new genre, paper 3, project 3, etc. But Monday's class is completely focused on discussing each other's papers. So please do make sure that Monday that you come on time to the Zoom class. We'll use the same Zoom link, and make sure you've got the comments that you made on people's papers somewhere easily accessible. And we'll spend the entire class just giving you time to work in those groups and talk about each other's papers. So have a great day, and I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. Let me know if you have questions. My office hours today will be from 2 to 3 in the virtual WebEx room. If you can't make that work, just email me and we'll find another way to communicate. Take care.